Like nearly a quarter of Haarlem's residents, Frans Hals and his family came as refugees from the Spanish-occupied southern states. By his 20s, Hals had already made his name, capturing the city's bourgeoisie in paint. Hals's most famous portrait, the so-called Laughing Cavalier, takes us straight to the beating heart of Haarlem. We don't know who the sitter was, but we can work out why he wanted to be painted. The picture was a Valentine's card. This man's gift to the woman he wanted to marry. Hence his amorous look. And he's literally wearing his heart, lots of them in fact, on his sleeve. Have me, the picture says. Buy into me, and I'll make it worth your while. Hals could make anyone look 1,000,000 guilders. And he was just as impressive when working on a grander scale. At his peak, he cornered the market in a particularly lucrative form of group painting, civic guard portrait, prosperous burghers, generally depicted around a lavish banqueting table. Itself slightly eccentrically recreated here at the Frans Hals Museum. I think of Frans Hals as the first great painter of the 17th century Dutch male face. Slightly florid, slightly jowly, extremely substantial, almost formidably self-satisfied. But I think he's also the first great painter of the Dutch sense of civic and political identity. These men are members of the Company of St. George. They see themselves as the guardians of Haarlem's newfound wealth and prosperity. They're seated at their annual banquet, and I think that table stands for Haarlem and how well it's doing, positively laden with meat, cheese, bread. They have all they want. But Hals has done a rather remarkable and revolutionary thing in painting this picture, because what he's done is he's taken the international language of court portraiture, the notion of aristocratic swagger. Look at this gentleman on the right. His elbow is out thrust. And if you read the deportment books of the 17th century, you'll know that the out-thrust elbow is the mark of the gentleman. It symbolizes his right to elbow his way through the crowd of ordinary people. So he's taken this very grand language, a language that was meant, that had been invented to be applied to kings, queens, and courtiers. And yet, these people are not kings, princes, aristocrats. They're merchants. They've made their money through trade. What this picture proclaims is that we don't need the old regime, the old apparatus of absolutist monarchy to function as a society. We don't need it. We're doing perfectly well without it. Thank you very much. But house mania, like tulip mania, didn't last. The new money that made Hals rich came with new temptations. He had a weakness for drink. You can see it in the bags under his eyes and the disenchanted gaze. Business slipped away, and his painting became less fluent, but more profound. Near the end, he produced this. The regentesses of the old men's almshouse. These women, the board of Hals's local poorhouse, are painted in a much more sombre mood, mirroring his own change of fortune. Commissioning the picture from Frans Hals may itself have been an act of charity, because his later years were much more troubled. He fell out of fashion, his fortunes fell. Now, 1664, he was granted poor relief and 3 cartloads of peat to keep himself warm. And it's hard not to think that as he looked into the compassionate, serious faces of these women, he was moved to reflect himself on the transience of life, the fragility of life, perhaps the fragility of his own life. Darkness encroaches from all sides. The picture's 90% shadow, with just these beautifully poignant faces, almost the faces of ghosts staring out at us. I think the picture is very clever. I think it puts you in the place of someone appealing to these women for charity. They look at you, they consider your petition. Will they help you? Won't they help you? Will you be greeted by the hand that gives, or will you be refused by the hand that withholds? I think it's Hals's way of reflecting on the wheel of fortune that he himself had experienced in his own life, that no matter how high you rise, in the end, you do always have to head for the exit.
Just 2 years after painting this picture, Hals died, virtually penniless.